loving me, I loving you. Mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, sisters and brothers, friends for life, won't live in the past. All I wanna do now is making it last.
How can sexual abuse be used as a stepping stone to engender healthy relationships? That's what we're going to be talking about. It's time for another conversation. Welcome to Making It Last podcast. I'm your host, Noreen Daly, and with me to talk about such a delicate and sensitive topic for a lot of people is Popsann Francis, author of Knickknacks for Living, motivational speaker, university lecturer, and founder of Women Healing Together. Welcome, Popsann.
Thank you so much, Noreen. Thank you for having me.
So, before we get into the conversation, tell us a little bit about your book. What is it about? Why that book?
Okay, thank you. All right, so the book is entitled Knickknacks for Living, Motivation All Around. It was written at a time in my life. I think that was the worst moment in my life. And I was in my mid-20s, hit rock bottom, suffering from depression, having suicidal thoughts, really felt as if I was worthless and heading nowhere. And it was from that the Lord inspired me with this thought. You feel as if you are alone, but around you are spread my notes, my love notes of affection and kindness and just how much I am madly in love with you. And so the Lord started to give me object lessons of Him screaming at me how much He loves me. So I started penning all of those entries, and that is how Knickknacks for Living came about. As you notice, it's knickknacks. Sometimes you don't need an entire meal to fill you up because you don't even have the strength to take it all in metaphorically, but just little nuggets of food can help to push you along. So that's what Knickknacks for Living is all about, a very good read. And of course, it can be got on Amazon, whether in the Kindle version or the paperback.
All right. Good stuff.
Yes.
So we're talking about a topic which is quite sensitive and delicate for a lot of people for different reasons. Personally, I think this is one of the issues that sometimes as a church, we don't talk about enough. How can sexual abuse be used as a stepping stone? Because a lot of people think that once it is that you have gone through such a heart-rending experience that there's hardly any positive that can come out of it. But we're going to try to, put that spin on it today. So how can it be used as a stepping stone to engender healthy relationships?
Thank you so very much. And that is, when I make mention of Knickknacks for Living, that is a change of perspective that I'm talking about. How is it that we can experience things that are so traumatic, like myself, being sexually abused repeatedly as a child? You are placed in a category of damaged. You are placed in a category. Some people think you can't be healed, but there are like anything in life, the positives can always be drenched or be squeezed from it. And I just want to share some with you from my experience and from speaking with women, mentoring women and coaching men.
Okay.
One of the things I realized with myself and others is that those of us who are survivors going on to thrivers from childhood sexual abuse, we have an uncanny awareness of pain in others. We can see it from afar. And sometimes we can't even explain it. And that skill, that quality right there can help us to help others heal. Because sometimes you're in a room, and I can speak for myself, sometimes you're in a room, the person is smiling, everybody thinks the person is okay, but you can just discern the pain from deep within. Wow. And because of that, you're able to start a conversation. You are able to bridge gaps. You are able to provide a safe space and a safe place for so many people. So that's one way. Another way is that because our boundaries were eroded from very early as children, we can use the experience to help us to establish strong and appropriate boundaries in our adult lives. Because there are so many persons who accept everyone, take in everyone, and it's all good and well to be friendly and loving and kind. But when you would have experienced an erosion of your boundaries from a young age, then you get the additional perspective of how important boundaries are. And if you can implement that as a survivor and help others to implement, then you can see great things happening there.
Before you continue, give me an example of that, because somebody might be listening and thinking, in terms of boundaries, they might be thinking just in terms of physical.
Oh, okay. All right. I have a theory that I've come up with called the 5-eye boundary wheel. And it is an absolutely powerful theory, and it is something that I've practiced in my life. So many of us, Noreen, go about and we readily expose and divulge our innermost thoughts, feelings, and vulnerabilities to everyone who calls his or herself a friend. That sacred space that is supposed to be between you and God. So many persons freely give that away to others, and that opens the door for manipulation. It opens the door for further abuse in adulthood because we do not understand the sacredness of it. And let me explain to you what I mean. When a child is being groomed by the potential perpetrator or abuser, what they tend to do for children is to infiltrate that sacred space between the child's understanding of his or herself. They become the conscience of the child by saying things like, I will not hurt you, nobody needs to know, or if you talk, I will hurt your parents. So the child's ability to think for his or herself, maybe the child may not be able to understand fully what is happening, but there's this level of discomfort that is there. But because the perpetrator comes in that sacred space and that innermost space of the child and takes over, as it were, the thinking processes and the brain of the child, the boundary is eroded, and then that is when he or she will have his or her way. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes, it does.
Yes, and I think that is the first stage of protecting the boundary. Understanding that there are certain things within you, and there is a relationship that you have with God that nobody else is to come in and dictate what is right for you, what is wrong for you, what makes you feel uncomfortable, and what makes you feel embarrassed or anything like that.
Okay. I know you've been enjoying the conversation, but we're going to take a little break and get a word from our sponsor. So, the whole idea of a branding strategy sounded so exotic and so fancy to me. But after having several conversations with Neon, I now have a clearer understanding. I am sure of what my identity is, what it is that I want people to see Noreen Daly as. Thanks, Neon. Thanks, Splint. Visit them at wearesplint.com. All right. You're about to say what the third one was.
Yes. Then the other way that we can use the traumatic experience of childhood sexual abuse to help us is this. So many of us as survivors, and as I say, going on to survivors, when we were faced with that traumatic experience, many of us suffer from disassociation. And when I say disassociation, I mean association from reality. Basically trying to survive. Like myself, I would immerse myself in my schoolwork. I would immerse myself in writing poetry. I would be by myself. There are certain things that I cannot remember because of the disassociation.
Okay.
So when I say to people, before 5 years old, because my first experience of childhood sexual abuse started at 5 years old. Before 5 years old, my brain, my memory rather, is as sharp as can be. I remember things from when I was 2 years old, 3 years old. Sometimes I'm recounting these experiences to my mother and she's absolutely surprised. But when it reaches 7, 6, 8, there are certain things I can't remember because of the disassociation. I say that to say, during those moments of disassociation and moments of pain, when a child is trying to grapple with what is happening and trying to make sense of the pain and the trust that have been taken disadvantage of, we survive and we cope. We create strategies just to survive the next day or the next minute or the next hour. Someone who is listening to Making It Laugh, who has experienced sexual abuse as a child, maybe say, well, it was really terrible. Yes, it was terrible, right? But what have you learned? You have learned that you can survive.
Yes.
You have learned that amidst the trauma and the pain, you have made it thus far. And though you may feel broken and you may feel a shell of yourself, the fact is you are still breathing and you are still coping. And it is this ability to survive that gives us insight and gives us the perspective that maybe others don't have, that we do not easily frizzle under pressure. We are able to take the bull by the horn, and we are able to survive, and we're able to cope, and we're able to make it because of so many things that we have endured. So that is another way that we can use that traumatic experience to help us as we grow and as we develop and as we continue on our road to healing and recovery.
You said that you sense the pain in others, so then a safe space, safe place is created. Help. There's help to that you help you to establish appropriate boundaries. The whole idea of when you disassociate in terms of, I think in my mind I would call it suppression, but it's not necessarily suppression. It actually leads to survival. But are there any other that you know tips or pointers that you'd like to share?
Yes, there is one more that I'd like to share. And that is, I'm going to be speaking from the perspective of a parent. I'm not a parent yet biologically, but I've spoken to many who are parents, and I do have very young siblings that I have functioned as a parent. Another way that we can use the experience of surviving from abuse is using the knowledge that we have to help to empower our children and other children who are in our spheres of influence, who are not our biological children, to be prepared for the harshness of the world. By teaching them from very young, again, about boundaries, about respecting and accepting their feelings, whether there are feelings of discomfort, whether there are feelings of being fearful or uncomfortable. Because so many times, and I know you can relate, especially in the Caribbean, children are not given so many times, let me not be generous, so many times, children are not given the scope to explore their feelings, to share their feelings, and that in and of itself becomes a paradise, for want of a better term, a grand opportunity for perpetrators to prey upon children. And I find that so many times, women who would have experienced abuse, when they become mothers, instead of going back and understanding and reviewing and seeing how they became victims so that they can use that information to protect their children. They tend to sweep it under the rug because it's taboo. They don't want their children to know about it. And look what happens. The generational curse continues.
Yes.
Only to find out, oh, because I swept my experience under the rug and did not use it to benefit my daughter or my son, my daughter or my son now becomes a victim. And then the hollering starts and the guilt starts. But we could have done something if we were vulnerable to our children to use our experience to help protect them.
What about somebody who's listening though, Popsann, and it will say, maybe in some way you will have them lose their innocence and become well, overly suspecting of others when they are nice to them. What would be your response to that?
Wonderful. My response would be age appropriateness is critical. Age appropriateness. For example, my little sister, I started teaching her from very young about accepting her feelings and acknowledging her feelings.
Okay.
I didn't just teach her about good touch, bad touch in terms of the genitalia and stuff like that. Anywhere on your body, anybody makes you feel uncomfortable, you should know that you can come to your sister and you can share anything. So when we talk about equipping our children, we're not just talking about, exposing them to detailed and explicit sexual information.
Right.
Something as simple as causing your child to feel comfortable in your presence to share.
Yes.
Because most times children who are abused, they don't feel comfortable in sharing. Most times when the abuse starts, it starts with a touch. It starts with a hug. And I can see from experience, you know that touch and that hug, because of that sacred space within you, you know that something is off. You can't explain it, but you are uncomfortable. What if that child is comfortable to run to mom or dad or anybody and say, uncle, whomever, caused me to, then you could have prevented it.
Yes.
So we always think in complex terms, but sometimes the simplest things can help.
Yeah. That's true. You've said a lot, and if it is that you've given us literally 4 pointers, but if it is that somebody's still listening and they're somewhat cynical, what's the one thing you'd say to that person who is saying, it's all well and good for you to say because you found a way to rise above this. I'm still struggling through this. I don't know if at this point I can see or take a positive spin to this. What would be your reaction to that person?
It is okay. And that may be surprising. What you are hearing today from me did not happen over the course of a year or 2 or even 5. It never happened over the course of 10 years. It has been a journey of a lifetime. Everybody's pace is different. Sometimes the only thing you may be conceptualizing right now is, I just need to survive today. And that is okay. You just need to survive today. And you may not be able to put a wonderful spin on it to get positivity out of it. But if there is one person in your life whom you can think about and say, I want to press forward because of my son, or because of my daughter, or because of my job, or that is enough. You are doing enough, and just do the best you can in the best way you can, and do not aspire necessarily to be like Popsann, who is at a stage where she can speak openly and where she can speak candidly. Just aspire to be the best version of you at this present moment.
And that's an excellent note to end on, because this podcast is all about helping us to have better relationships, not just with ourselves, but with other people. Thank you so much, Popsann Francis.
You are most welcome.
This is Noreen Daly. Until next time.
Making you last is all I care to do. You loving me by loving you. Mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, sisters and brothers, friends for life, won't live in the past. All I wanna do now is making it last.